Welcome to the We Are All Agents podcast. We're here with Steve Cadigan. We started this podcast because there is endless amounts of change in technology, change in business models, software industries are being disrupted, and we as HR professionals need to understand and take a leadership role in how this change happens. So that is the premise. We are all agents. Let's not let technology happen to us. Let's take the lead and dictate how it should be and how it can help us deliver on our vision for the future of work. And we couldn't think of a better person to join us for that than Steve.
Yes, so Steve Cadigan with us today has an illustrious career. He's worked, amongst other things, he was the first CHRO at LinkedIn around 2009. He grew the company from 400 people to 4,000 people and expanded the company to 17 countries. He is now a talent hacker. He's worked with Fortune's 500 companies, including Airbnb, Cisco, and also Sequoia, Greylock partner, and Anderson Horowitz. And amongst other things, as a talent hacker, the other things that he's doing is also helping leader and organization integrate AI into the talent strategy. And he's an advisor and board member on various companies. And he's written a book in 2001. The book is called Work Quake, Embracing the Aftershock of COVID-19 to Create a Better Model of Working. And the book is about exploring ideas to build better models for the future of work that inspire both employers and employees. So in other terms, Steve is basically a philosopher of work, which is one of the reasons we wanted to talk to him today. And we thought it would be really an interesting conversation to have around AI and its impact on work. And we really wanted to hear his take on whether AI could create a new model for work. Or should.
To kick it off, Steve, maybe you can just tell us, in your book, you're saying that we should be thinking about how to build new models for work. What are some of those models, or what do you have in mind for that? And is AI a part of that, not a part of it? Is it a hindrance or is it a helper? How do you see that?
Sure. Well, first, thank you both for the introduction, for inviting me to have a conversation with you. I think the domain of being a talent leader, human resource leader in any organization has never been more challenging. I mean, we have more things impacting the world of work than any time in history, and we're facing more new moments. The acceleration of the need for new skills, the increasing amount of turnover, the increasing number of people not only leaving organizations, but changing careers has never been greater. And when you combine people changing careers with the need for new skills, the reservoir of qualified talent that you can recruit has now radically shifted. And the pool of people ready to fill your open positions is smaller than it's ever been. And business wasn't built for that. Business wasn't built for upskilling your people constantly. It was mainly built for find people who are experienced, plug them in, and have them do a job for the rest of their career. And probably over the last 20 years, that's shifted to maybe people, will be focusing on what they're doing for 5 or 10 years. And now we're seeing companies do things we've never seen before, and particularly in technology, where we're seeing people let their staff go and hire at the same time. It used to be stop recruiting, let people go, we need to cut expenses. Now it's like, no, we need new skills. We need to take the company in a new direction, a new product line. And so that is, put a lot of pressure on people thinking about talent strategy. And I think this whole AI tsunami that we all face has another dimension that's put us on our heels, because everyone seems to be obsessed with how AI is going to create job losses. And I think the AI narrative is one of the worst marketing campaigns in history. It's fundamentally scaring most people, particularly white collar workers, who it's usually technology is going to threaten the blue collar frontline, workers. Now we've got this, I don't even know if you could say it's a technology. It's just this platform of capacity with AI, which is unlike anything we've ever seen before. And so I think, where I'm coming on this is, and again, the tricky part with AI, among other things, is that it's not a baked cake. This is a constant and evolutionary, domain where every day, even the companies, the big tech companies, the OpenAI and the Googles and the Facebooks and Amazons are introducing new features, new capacities, new, deeper thinking and new ways of, leveraging the enormous amount of insight and data that can be generated and regenerated. And so, that's impacting jobs. It's impacting how people think about it. And the first advice I have for listeners is we all really need to become students of what this is.
Mm.
Because what's particularly curious is that the creators of almost AI products are as terrified as they're excited about what could possibly result from implementing their products, right?
Yeah.
You listen to, whether it's Sam Altman, whether it's the president of Microsoft or president of CEO of Google and the early creators of AI products, they're like, wow, this could really end bad. Like this could go a really wrong direction. We need to put some guardrails in. And when they're asked, well, what do you mean? They said, well, we're not sure, but we really need to be careful. And
Yeah.
so that really presents like a peculiar dynamic that we've not faced before, where there's like enormous promise, but enormous fear and concern at the same time, right? And so, I think we need to be very careful as custodians of the talent in our organizations to recognize the fear that our employees have about AI. And maybe that's a good place to start. Like if you're like any organization saying, yeah, I want to leverage the best technology to realize the best outcomes for my company. What's a good place to start? Well, who knows about AI in the company? Let's bring those people in. Who knows about AI in our ecosystem, on our board, in our investor community, in our partnership community? Let's surround ourselves with people who know more about this than us so we can learn about it. Because
Right.
particularly in the world of talent, there are enormous ethical violations that you could trip over before you know it. And so I think it's really, really important that we educate ourselves and surround ourselves with people who know more about this than we do. And, I call that sort of like an AI advisory board. It's
Mhm.
really important. And so, but gosh, the hard part of this right now is that everyone feels behind. And AI just showed up yesterday. Yet, why do we all feel behind? And we're all worried that our competitors know more about it than we do, right?
Yeah.
And that's just a really hard place to start from. Fear and anxiety and worry and doubt is not a good place to start from. And then, you add on to that, the narrative in the media, as I was mentioning earlier, is all about job loss. And the trap I think a lot of the companies that I'm working with, I see are falling into is they're thinking about implementing AI the same way we've thought about prior technologies. Let's
Mhm.
implement it. Let's cut expenses. Let's lower our reliance on labor to get work done. And let's, for less money, let's implement this technology and get more done for less money. And that's going to create greater profits for us by cutting expenses and cutting people and cutting headcount.
Yep.
And so the first big media push with AI is, oh, look at that company and the 400 customer service reps that they let go. So if you think about what AI can do for you, I think the greater promise is opening up new markets, creating new verticals for you, finding new ways for you to build new ways of creating value, making jobs and people more powerful. But no, that's not the place most people are starting. Let's cut headcount. Let's reduce expenses. And I'm sad about that because I think that's about 1% of what AI can really deliver. So why
I
are
don't
we
know if
focused? No, go ahead.
is that a failure of imagination? What is causing that? Because I know, like, when Microsoft released a Copilot, they marketed and branded it as an augmentation tool to help people perform, increase performance. It's not here to replace people, it's here to elevate people. I think that was said by the head of HR at Accenture. So Accenture, Microsoft, these companies that are behind the tech movement are telling us it should be for augmenting people. But Danielle and I in our business, and I'm sure other people have experienced it, and you just said in the media, you've heard it as well. CEOs are telling us, okay, how do we cut our level one customer support staff, 100% of those people, and replace that layer with AI that can save us $10 million? Or where else can we cut, optimize to increase our profit margin, grow shareholder value, et cetera? So they're really fixated on that as leaders. So is
Yeah.
that a failure of their imagination? Certainly not being pitched from the tech companies. They're not saying, hey, you can use this to lay off people. And then one more little anecdote. We do see engineers focused on replacing people quite a lot. So for example, there was a lot of hype recently about the first AI engineer that could build a website end to end. So the engineers are marketing job replacement. Whether or not they say it's for replacing people, they're still trying to do human jobs. So where's the origin of the problem? How do we get around it? How do we imagine that potential new value and not just fixate on layoffs and replacing existing jobs?
Yeah,
Because
I
that's where
don't.
we're trapped.
It's a great, great question, and this is a great place for us to launch our discussion today. I think we are stuck in a way of thinking about how to leverage technology that is just, I think, missing the mark of what's possible with AI. So technology, reduce expenses, technology, cut headcount, reduce reliance on labor, benefits costs, and payroll for most organizations, paying people is about, for most companies, is 80% of the expense. Okay. So if you can find a way to create value without people, well, that's great. I don't know how you do that in the long run, but I think that's a contributor, number one. Number two, I think if you really want to realize what's ultimately the full capability of what AI can do, which is new ways of delivering value, get yourself into new markets, reinvent your business in some ways, that's fundamentally a human threat to someone's power. I got here by managing command and control. I got here from an old business model. And why would I introduce AI and make myself potentially vulnerable, potentially the company to rely on me less? Like, why would I do that? You understand? I think it's a human nature reaction to something new. And that's a challenge for us, honestly. And I know that's why I'm not pointing fingers at anybody, but I'm saying we're really missing an opportunity here. And the coolest part about AI, I think, is it's unlocking the recognition that our human capacities are the ultimate superpower that we bring. And if we can leverage AI to do a lot of the rote stuff that we were doing, that unlocks our ability to do what we do best, which is reason and communicate and lead and deal with conflict and understand how to work through very complex human interactions that are, causing all kinds of friction all over the world right now as we record this in ways we've never seen before. How can we leverage that to, better outcomes? So, for example, this is the one topic I've spent most time in my career addressing as a human resource executive? People disagreeing. Okay, people disagreeing. This department product is pissed off at engineering, or this leader thinks that leader is stealing their people, or not. People aren't recognizing me enough, or my boss isn't treating me fairly. What AI has proven it can deliver already in very raw form is to give you the ability to express something very potentially emotional and difficult and complex in ways that are way more constructive than you might be prepared to deliver. All right. So I'll give you an example. A friend of mine in the family, I should say a family member, was in the middle of an internship and it was impacting their ability to finish their projects at school. So they called me and said, "Hey, I need to probably get out of this. And how do I let my employer know? They've been really nice to me offering this internship, but my studies are suffering. I need to say I'm out. How do I do that?" I go to my friend over here, ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, ask him how to do this, tell him all the circumstances. And in seconds, he had an incredible letter to help him really well articulate something that is really uncomfortable, right? And so I don't see a lot of narrative around that, right? And that's, I think to answer your question, like, so why are we not seeing people take advantage of this? I think it's human nature. I think it's a threat to say, hey, leverage AI to, do something different. Like, why would I do that? I'm an expert in this. I studied this. I have this title. I have this compensation. All that's under threat if I rip the Band-Aid off and say, I'm going to try to reinvent myself. It's just, we're not, all the rewards, all the, comforts and security that we have sought to try to benefit ourselves with. I think people are worried that might tip the stability away. And I see that from leaders too. That's why leaders in organizations are like, I'm not sure how we're going to do this.
No, please go ahead. I was thinking about this, what you just said about the, switching what it is that we will be doing in ways that maybe we don't quite understand yet. It's quite interesting to think about how could we measure how good we are at that, right? So traditionally, Taylor would measure, productivity as how much value do you create by hour of work, and therefore how much do you work, right? That's like the main metric. But if now we are switching to can you produce the best version of what you would be producing with this new tool? How do you consider we should evaluate that?
Well, what's really interesting, Danielle, when you think about this, if we step back for just a second, and I did an article about this a few weeks ago. Here we are trying to wrestle, making sense and reconciling this AI reality that's just, coming at us like a tidal wave. We still haven't mastered email. We still haven't mastered meetings. We still are trying to figure out why people should be in an office. And if they're in an office, what kind of work should be done there versus at home? You understand? Like there's some real fundamental stuff in the world of work that's, arguably way simpler than what AI is. And yet we're not solving those. Like email, literally, when I go to organizations, say, okay, let's talk about your AI. Okay, let's talk about your history and your confidence implementing new technologies. How's it going with email? Is that delivered more productivity and more free time? No, it's a vehicle that we've weaponized to put people behind and give them impossible amounts of information to consume. Maybe we should start using AI to fix that. Like let's go after that. Let's go after what is the greatest way for us to create value as a team. How can artificial intelligence possibly help us? Is anyone looking at that? Let's go find out, right? And so when I think about your question, Danielle, I think about, let's be honest with ourselves. Like there's some really big things that are broken, and why don't we try to, wrestle those first, rather than try to add a new, monster on our plate, if you will.
I think that's really inspiring. And I was thinking back to what you originally said. If you're going to adopt AI or think about how AI fits in, put a team together, look at the technology, look at the organization, look for use cases where you can add a ton of value. And perhaps those people are looking for opportunities by inspecting processes that are expensive and trying to cut bits and bytes out of those processes to automate them, just going down the automation pathway like you discussed. And they're not necessarily thinking about, okay, what are all the different types of value that we want to create as an organization? How much of that are we creating? Where is it being created? And could some of those teams be leveraged further? Could they do more? Could they do other things that they're not currently doing? Or maybe we think about that as an organization as a whole. Are there new product lines that we haven't got into, new ways of serving customers that we haven't considered because it was too expensive, too challenging, etc. So perhaps those teams that are really smart people are just focused on the wrong layer of analysis. They're focused on the wrong topic, the wrong set of questions. And that's getting them down a path of cost cutting and sort of removing labor as opposed to value creation.
Yeah,
I know it's hard to think about as an individual for myself, but at least at the org level, you'd think it'd be possible.
Right. Well, let me take, Danielle, your last question, and Abanga, what you're just talking about, and let's use a practical example. And this is why this moment is so hard. I have a lot of friends who are executive recruiters. Okay. And I was playing tennis with a friend of mine the other day, and he asked me, as we should be talking about, he said, how do you think AI can make recruiting better? And here's the block. I said, is that the right question? Because we have a belief of how we should do business, which is recruit new skills, right? And so I said, maybe we should think about how we can leverage AI to ask it, AI, I have an issue in my organization, which is recruiting. I'm having a hard time finding the right people with the right skills at the speed I want. Okay. And when I hire them, they don't stick around, but we'll get to that problem later. So can you help me, solve this problem? Think about this problem differently. How do you think about, how can I do it? So then AI is probably going to say, well, what is recruiting? And then you're probably going to say, well, recruiting is necessary because I need new people and new skills because some people left and my needs are changing. So I need to bring that in. And then AI might ask, well, what are the skills of the people that you have right now? How well do you know them? And most talent leaders will go, yeah, not really well. I have their CV and their LinkedIn profile from when they joined, and I haven't probably kept up because no one really cares about the learning management system that we bought from some piece of crap, overpriced Workday product or whatever. And so we don't really know. Then AI is going to say, well, how can you think recruiting's the problem? Maybe the problem is skill awareness. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe if you're more aware of the skills of the people you have and who's most likely to learn a new skill, that you could go into the world of skill awareness and solve recruiting. You see what I'm saying? So I need new skills. Okay, well, how do you know that you need to recruit them? Because that's the way we've always thought about it, right? Like, I want someone with experience, so I need to go out and get it. Yeah, but if the time to hire those people is longer than it's ever been, and it's expensive, and it's stressing out all the people who are doing 3 jobs because 2 of them are open, and we've got this vicious cycle of wellness that's being impacted because we can't fill, maybe we should think about this problem differently, which is, I need to constantly be upskilling my people. I need to always be in a state of newness and growth, and I need to understand who has high learning velocity in my recruiting process, right? When I'm bringing people in, what they know now is important. What they know tomorrow is more important. Do they have the capacity to learn new things quickly? And do I have clues, AI? Can you give me clues that someone is a fast learner, that someone is an early adopter, that someone lives in an ocean of change, right? We as talent people, we love change. That's why I'm in HR, because I'm a
Yeah.
change junkie. I just love it. But, the older I get, the less I love it. But I love new environments and new situations. Most people don't. Most people are like, hunker down, and I don't want to change that. So that recruiting example, I think, is one of the reasons, back to one of your earlier questions, Abanga and Danielle, why this is really hard and how should we think about it? Like, we're thinking about AI in the model of how we've built work today. And to think about from a clean slate, like helping AI, like, why are we doing recruiting? Now you're getting really down at the studs of what talent strategy I think we need to rebuild. You know what I'm saying? And that's
Yeah.
really, but it's really scary, because that's, we got to kind of strip it a lot down to nothing and rebuild. And a lot of people aren't prepared for that, right? It's pretty
You're talking
scary.
about root cause analysis, like getting to these like fundamental underlying objectives and then building up what can AI's role be from there. So if you say recruiting's goal is creating capacity, capacity is about having the right skills to match the work that we're trying to do strategy-wise, market-wise, et cetera. And getting the right skills doesn't just come from hiring, it comes from all these different sources. So the solution might be for that firm, upgrade our learning management system or change how we plan skill development, or like you said, skill awareness, like just understand skills better so we can discover people at the right time for the right situation. We may not be aware of all their variety of skills, and all their skills may not be utilized. So we should dig into the right skills at the right time. That might be the answer. But for the head of recruiting, how is that helpful? Because then the answer is go tell the head of learning that they need to do more. So just, do we need to collaborate differently? Like, how do we actually organize around these root causes? Because that's clearly what's missing. And we don't need to talk about AI in that whole conversation. It's really more about really understanding your business goals, your HR goals, tying those together, and then applying AI at the right time and moment. But that might mean the head of recruiting is fixing recruiting by doing nothing and telling learning, you need to help me out, and we need to figure out how to hire internally, grow internally better.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, why this is really hard is because we don't have a lot of benchmarks, examples of how people are really radically implementing talent strategy with AI yet,
Right.
right? Making the sausage now. And what are we taught earlier in our careers when we face a new problem? Go benchmark, go see what other people are doing. And now's the moment where we have to do some experiments. And there's 2 experiments I want to share with the listeners that I think are fascinating in the world of talent strategy. One is one that Walmart conducted. The largest retailer in the United States gave 50,000 employees a generative AI tool and said, here's this generative AI tool. Go use it and try it and experiment and see what you can find. Can you manage your teams better? Can you hit your goals better? Can you find a different way of setting KPIs and communicating with your team? Can you delight the customers differently? Can you have new insights around managing inventory or store displays? And they started just saying, not doing what traditional companies do. Here's a technology and go to the training and here's how you use it.
Mm-hmm.
Here's this. We don't know what it can do. Play around with it, because we think there's a lot of potential. We don't know. And that feedback was just off the charts. A, that they were given the opportunity to have an experiment, and B, all the insights started to explode. So they doubled down and gave it to another 50,000 associates.
Mm-hmm.
That's really phenomenal. And not in a company that you would think would be pioneering, talent strategy, leadership, generative AI solutions. So that's example number 1. So we're starting to get some of these, out there. and more visible. And I'm trying to look for the ones that are in companies that no one's ever heard of, right? Because it's all, I'm tired of Google did, if you tell me another Google benchmarking thing, I'm going to slap you. I'm so tired of it. Or Tesla or Amazon. Like, no, I want to hear the company that no one's ever heard of. And so I ran into, and this is sort of a well-known company, but I was on a panel in London last summer and with the CEO of Prudential Insurance. And I was really beating the table around. I'm so unimpressed by how companies are using, AI for talent strategy and blah, blah, blah. And he goes, "Hey, I got an example I'd like to share with you." So I'm like, yeah, let's see. And so he said, we have a big problem, had a big problem at Prudential that our turnover was high. And we felt people were leaving that could do other jobs that they might not be aware of, or might not be aware that they could do. So we have built a tool, and we're still evolving it, that maps you, the new employee, wherever you sit in the company, to every job in the company. Every one. Not just the ones, if you're in HR, that are in HR. We're talking about product, engineering, actuarial, tax, finance, treasury, marketing, systems, engineering, everything. And it shows you, Danielle, for these 300 jobs, you are 20% qualified. For these 400 jobs, you're 35, 40%. For these, you're 60%. And if you want to go in any of those directions, here's the learning path for you. Here's some coaches, here's some mentors, here's some classes. You know what you want to do, but we want you to see day one how qualified you are for every role in the company. That's like, why hasn't that ever existed? It's such a no-brainer. Your first day new hire orientation, every company, you should know how qualified you are for every single job in the company. But I never did it, but now that I'm sort of thinking about, like, wait a second, that should be sort of like new employee orientation requirement 101. That raises the need for the companies to be highly aware of all the skills you have, right? And it also takes the pressure off of siloed thinking, right? Around because I remember, this happened to me my whole career. I was in Singapore for 2 years. And for 3 years after I was in Singapore, I got all these job offers to go back to Singapore. I'm like, no, I was there. I don't want to, I loved it. My first son was born. I don't want to go back there. You're thinking like, because I was that's where I should go, right? Like, not like, hey, that guy learned how to work in a new theater. Maybe he could help us in a different theater, Maybe he really likes that, but it's Singapore. You understand? So thinking, I think, is really limiting us. But these experiments, we're going to start to share and hear more of these. And I think, I would challenge you on your show to sort of use this as a platform. Like, hey, let's talk to so-and-so who's doing such and such with AI, and how's it going? And what were the lessons you learned? And the big problem about where we are is most companies were not built to experiment. Most companies were built to produce predictable, reliable, consistent outcomes, and no experimentation here, right? And you hear companies say, "Oh yeah, we take risks here, fail fast." And then you go talk to the employees, and the employees, "Are you a fail first culture?" And they're like, "No, you go first. See what happens to you. You try to fail." And it's that's the big challenge. Is most cultures were not built on experimentation. That's why I love working with a lot of technology companies, because it's all about experimentation when you're in software development, right? It's like A/B testing. Let's learn, and those are the companies that are enjoying a heyday right now with AI adoption and implementation. And it's the ones that were not built for that are really going to struggle with this.
Single most important metric then to measure both the workplace and the individual capacity to use AI is just the capacity to change and to just adapt to change. No skill in particular, just how quickly can you change, right, and how fast can you adapt. That's not, I haven't seen that. You would think, how quickly can you learn skill, but this is also true for company now. They have to change as quickly as people do and as the technology does.
Yeah.
One thing that Danielle and I have always had a problem with about is potential, and limiting potential to whether or not you're a fit for an executive position directly above where you currently sit, as opposed to what are all the things that you could learn to do and contribute given the constant change of human beings and the market, and how can we rapidly position you to add more value than you add today. That's real potential, because it's actual measurable impact that you can have based on your interests and ability to acquire skills, as opposed to, do you fit the current definition of CTO or not, which doesn't
And
seem like a very accurate interpretation of potential.
yeah, and it's cemented by their compensation. Like the longer you're in this particular track and the more you go up this particular level, the faster the rewards are realized. But if I go pivot to a different department, that's uncertain, right? Of my earning potential is going to be impacted in a positive way. And so, our rewards models reinforce the, unfortunate outcomes that you just described. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to plus one other thing you said, which is the fortunate thing about AI is because it uses human language, which is natural for all people who speak any language that the LLM can speak or understand. Um, it means it's quite open for experimentation and development in a way that traditional software development was not. So it's far cheaper, faster, and more accessible to experiment. You can build stuff internally and test it in a matter of days that would have taken you months. We looked at our own roadmap for building product and we saw it shrink from 6 months down to a week or two because of this technology. So that means if you're a company, you have an idea for a tool, you don't necessarily need to put a team together to go inspect every major software platform and then sign up with a $50,000 contract to test some idea. You can actually, in a very small team, in a matter of weeks, come up with an idea like the one you talked about of the job mapping and test. See, does it work? Does it help? Does it not help? How does it help? What should we build more or less? Then if you want to work with someone else, you can go source it, or you can continue to build internally. It's way more flexible, faster, and cheaper than previous technologies, which is quite exciting. It means that experimentation is now a key skill set in a way that it wasn't before, as opposed to tracking down vendors.
Yeah. Jensen Huang, there's a famous comment that he made end of last year, talking about how 5 years ago, STEM was the most important skill that, parents thought that their kids needed to know. And now he said, now it's English. Now it's the most, that's the most amount of documented data in the world is English. Second is Mandarin and third is Spanish. And so those of us who are, fluent English speakers, hey, we got a huge pool advantage of what AI can do for us. But isn't that interesting that the capacity to express yourself and is going to be, what do they call that, sort of your query of AI, and your outputs are going to reflect how well are your queries, right? How well are your asks of what AI can do for you. And there's whole courses around making people learn better. I mean, I spend probably 2 hours a day every morning listening to thought leaders like Connor Grennan's one of my favorite ones that I follow, like what's happening and what products seem to be interesting and producing different outcomes. That's how I discovered Perplexity, which has replaced Google for me as a search, which isn't perfect by any means, because they've gotten themselves in some hot water, just like a lot of organizations that are pushing the envelope here. But isn't that interesting? So what should we tell our children, or what should we expect from schools, or what's the right education path right now? And it seems to be liberal arts. How you think, how you express yourself, how you write, how you communicate is going to be powerful in the future for you to unlock the potential of what AI could deliver, right? And that just went like in the span of like half a decade. Like that just happened really fast. And how long is it going to be true? Like I get asked all the time, and I'm sure you guys do too, what's the most important skill we should be teaching our employees or our kids? And I'm like, I know the answer, but you're not going to like it. And they said, well, what is that? I said, it's the skill of learning. Like that is the most important skill. It's not chase this skill or chase this technology or technique. It's the skill of learning. And what's beautiful about I have 3 teenage boys and 2 teenage stepdaughters. They don't expect technology to work. They expect it to be broken, and my dad, when he was first using Zoom, he's like all frustrated. This is not consumer friendly. I don't know what's an app. I don't know what's a window. Like, what is this thing? And I said, well, Dad, the camera is not on. In the lower side, there's an icon. There's a sign with an icon with a camera and a red line through it. He's like, no, there isn't. I go, are you in the app? He goes, what's the app? I'm in the window. I go, oh my gosh. And so he was expecting it to work. And my kids are like, no, it's not going to work. I'm going to turn it on, turn it off, figure it out. Right. And that's why I have hope for, this experimentation economy, because I think we've got a generation of people that, that my kids are so good at figuring, my phone's not working, something's not right, give it to me, like, and they hand it back here. I'm like, what did you do? Like, Like, they just look at me like, Dad, you're so lame. How did you not know that? But they don't expect it to work, and they're constantly troubleshooting. And I think that's a wonderful skill, you know?
Do you want to go?
No, you go.
There's an interesting side effect, I think, to a situation where learning and let's say creativity and change are becoming like the core set of skills that everybody has to have, and maybe that's in some way what we will measure as well, which is that maybe we don't need either to have like 8 hours a day of work like we used to, because if your aim is to be creative and to come up with the best way to express yourself in a specific setting, maybe you can do that in 4 hours. Maybe we're actually going to find ourselves evaluating not time as a single unit, but just the output and the range and the creativity of the output. And maybe we'll just get to this utopian situation where you just actually need to work far less, which is just an interesting idea in terms of, work-life balance and how does that work?
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, this rich comments, Danielle, in terms of like things that I think about. I was in a conference a few weeks ago in Lisbon with 100 investors in mental wellness and brain science, and 100 promising startups in mental wellness and brain health. And I asked them, and it was the end of the day, and I was filling in for somebody, and so it was nothing to lose, and they were tired, and I was tired. So I said, I'm going to have some fun here. I said, let me ask you a question. What is the research that you're doing on sleep tell us is the optimal number of days that we should be working in a week? And they said 3. I said, really? That's the ultimate amount of productivity. We need more sleep. We need more rest to generate innovation and creative thinking. I said, is that true? Everyone agree with that? Yeah. Okay. How many of you are working 3 days a week right now? What do you think the answer was?
0.
No.
It's a
And so I get to this place, Danielle, and I had a podcast for a while, and we've taken a hiatus because we've been busy with other things. But one of my co-hosts, my partner Shane, he says, I think 4-day, 3-day work week is realizable. And I said, I agree it's realizable. I don't think it will be realized. And he says, what do you mean? I said, if you're a company and you have investors and you tell them, hey, we can use technology. We only have to work 3 days a week. She's going to say, the investor can say, well, then find some other stuff to do. Like if you can do this in 3 days, then build some other stuff in the 2 days, right? I just don't see the mindset saying, yeah, sure. My dollars that I gave you, yeah, just work 3 days a week. No problem. No, I don't see that. I just don't see that. It's a nice aspiration, but in my lifetime, I don't think we're going to realize that at scale. Even when you've read the experiments in the UK, in Germany, in France, they've done it in greater productivity, greater outputs. Someone's going to look at that and go, no, we can do more if we work that 5th day. I'd like to be more optimistic about it, and maybe you can convince me otherwise, but yeah.
Let's take this and build off it and ask a different question, which is, there's some compromise between what we would like to have and what seems feasible. And we think that some of these trends are going to be persistent. So we talked about experiment company. So companies that experiment more, experiment faster. We talked about aggressive learners, people who are proactively, consistently learning, upgrading themselves. We talked about talent mobility, moving around between positions, not having as linear directions in our roles. What kind of company are you imagining? So what's the Futurama? What's the realistic manifestation of these various trends? How does that come together in how a company organizes, compensates? I'm not saying you have all the answers, but let's start thinking about it. Let's start mapping this out. If we were drawing up a new company that leaned into these traits that we've described, what would it look like? And maybe we can dig in more around HR. What would HR be doing? How would it be supporting that type of organization?
Yeah, I love it. And now you're talking this is my wheelhouse of the domain of brainstorming is my happy place. I think companies will in the future are going to start morphing into ecosystems. And I think, we're seeing it already. Like look at Uber. Most people who are creating value for Uber are not employees. They're not. They're drivers. They don't work, as an Uber employee. They work as an independent. And I think that is going to take the pressure off of I have to have everyone fully dedicated to me all the time. Oh my gosh, recruiting's so hard. If I have other resources And, those design workshops and those teams in, whether it's Ukraine or Czech Republic or wherever, or India, these virtual teams that are part, I believe that's how this is going to play. And the biggest obstacle I see for organizations that are trying to change is they feel they have to do it with full-time staff that are dedicated to them, employed by them, and that's limiting. And healthcare is a great example. The biggest challenge for most healthcare systems in the United States is nurse turnover right now. They can go to the next postal code and make 4x what they're making because that hospital system in the next town over is really hurting and they need people right now because lives are on the line and they're going to pay whatever. So if I'm a nurse, I'm like, I can go drive 30 minutes or 45 minutes more a day, no problem. Or I'll stay in a hotel, make 4x, and I'll take a vacation in Cancun. And so when I go to hospital systems, say that's your big problem is travel nurses. Okay, why don't you get in the travel nurse business? And they look at me like, what do you mean? I said, yeah. Why does a nurse have to leave you to earn 4x for not an infinite period of time? They don't want to do that forever, but maybe you keep them in your organization and you acquire, merge with, buy, or get in the business of temporary staffing, which is really easier to run than a hospital system. And those people won't leave you. They're still in your family. And it's just like, nope, we don't do that. Or that's dirty. I'm like, no. That's a missed opportunity. That's a failure of your imagination, like you said earlier, Bonga, right? So that's how I see organizations play is we're going to have to get out of this domain of we own everything, building partnerships, sharing talent even. The Europeans have this term called secondment. I'm going to loan you my employees for a period of time. And you see that in retail in the holiday season. We need people just for a period of time. Okay, great. So they're, temporary. So the problem with realizing that at Bonga is the whole architecture of society for most first world countries is you have a full-time job. That's how you get a home loan. That's how you, get, your retirement is all based on you getting to it. Or how you get any loan is like, well, let's see your payroll stub. Yeah, but no, I've got 3, 4, or 5 jobs, and that's the problem. Healthcare. I can't get healthcare affordable me today because I don't have an employer. It's just me. So I'm paying so much more and it sort of forces me to go work for someone else. Like that's sort of the forcing function. I'm fortunate I don't have to do that, but most people don't have the economic independence that I've built over my career to be able to do that right now. So you see that ecosystem model, which I think is the ideal, is not going to be realized because the way societies have been built is you work for someone else. And that's how you get affordable healthcare insurance. And that's how you get all these other things like, home loan to buy a house. And so until that changes, I don't think we're going to see the ecosystem realize its full potential, right? Let's take a look at where, we're seeing great success right now is a new model. Someone asked me, what's the future of education, right? Because that's tied to the future of business, right? And I said, well, what I love is the Y Combinators and the Techstar examples. Here you're bringing in a whole bunch of entrepreneurs, you're bringing a whole bunch of mentors, and you're bringing a whole bunch of teachers, bringing new skills, and you're having all the mentors sit in an environment sharing ideas, not like, hey, that's my idea. I don't want to share it with you. You might steal it. Like, no, that's not the concept. So that's an ecosystem generative model, which I think, when I think about how it plays out, that's what gets me excited. I don't know. What do you guys think?
I'm thinking that this idea of secondment and relating to this other example that you gave earlier, the fact that you could map a person to every job in a company, the advanced version of that is that locally, all companies we can allow the employee to map themselves to all the jobs available in the area so that they can basically optimize using those employees over time and they can optimize their own value in the market. That would require a completely different set of, organizational infrastructure, doesn't it? It's as if it's not finished. It's kind of connected to others. It's like a fuzzy,
right. And it's an intellectual property lawyer's nightmare come true. Right? Like, we don't want to share with you our secrets and then have you go work for someone else like that. No. That's not how it works. And so, but you know what, there's a really interesting book called Regional Difference, written by a woman named Annalise Saxenian. She's a professor at Berkeley. It came out, 30 years ago. And it's a study of why did Silicon Valley win in the early days of the 70s when the East Coast of the US, Boston, and Cambridge and a Wang Computer and Digital Equipment Corp had more opportunity to win. Like, why did Fairchild Semiconductor become the epicenter, and then it led to Intel and all these other companies? And her conclusion was really interesting. She said, in the West, the idea was more important. In the East, who owned the idea was more important.
Right.
And so people were much more protective of the idea, and people didn't change companies and jobs. In the West, people changed companies and changed jobs, and the ideas moved them, and the ideas grew, and teams grew, and networks grew. And that's really an interesting, a wonderful study that I think still people, when I talk to Berlin or Barcelona or New York City or Austin, Texas, and they, Steve, help us become the next Silicon Valley. I go, all right, well, it has to start with knowledge sharing, and that's building an ecosystem. It's not about, the venture money and this and that. No, it's about, are you building a community where people are sharing ideas? That's where the power comes in. And the reason why an idea can turn into a profitable enterprise so fast in Silicon Valley is because I've changed jobs 12 times, and I know a great salesperson, a great engineer, a great product guy, a great lawyer, a great CFO. So when I've got an idea, I've got my team ready to go because I've moved around. And in an environment where you're not moving around, you're not building your network, you're not, iterating on your ideas. So I think that's the fluidity, I think, is very powerful,
Yeah, I love this. A friend of mine just recently wrote a book called Employment is Dead. And one of his name is Josh Dreen. One of his points is that the employment contract that we're used to is no longer attractive to the next generation. They can go and make $500,000 streaming themselves playing a video game. Why would they sell themselves for $65,000 to work for you for 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week with no 2 weeks vacation? No thanks.
Yeah.
So we do need to update our employment contracts and our view of employment and what it means. And to your point, it doesn't necessarily mean ownership. One of my cousins does a point 0.6 contract with her hospital system and then does something else with her. I think she does gardening with her other point 0.4. And it just helps her brain relax and gets her off her feet. So we may need to think about our employment contracts, but I did see one major barrier to this, which is we introduced a secondment idea early on in our recruiting business in Africa, and CEOs threw a fit. They reacted like we had asked them the most offensive question of all time, which is, can some of your people be rented out to other companies? And they were just like, no, this is the worst. Why would I ever do that? What are you thinking? Are you crazy? So there's a mindset of, once you have an employment contract with me, I own everything you do, every idea you have, and all your labor time. I don't want you to have any work activities outside of my company. If you have time for other work, you should be doing it here. And if that mindset doesn't change, it would be very difficult to build towards this ecosystem idea, which Silicon Valley, I would argue, has in many cases, but it's not common worldwide.
Yeah. Yeah, let me just add one more point to this notion. And I live in Silicon Valley, so I'm pretty familiar with it. And I'm also not here to sell that it's the nirvana that some people think it is. There's a lot that's broken, and there's a lot that could be better. And sometimes when people say, we want to be the next Silicon Valley, I say, why are you aiming so low? Why don't you build something build something better? But what one of the interesting dimensions of this, and I'm spending time researching my next book on this topic, and it's sort of stagnant right now in quicksand as I work on other things. But something that I think ties together the thread of some of the things we've been talking about and what AI could possibly deliver is the notion that in Silicon Valley, what's really interesting to me is that there's greater turnover here than anywhere in the world. More people are changing jobs faster than anywhere else. And more people are doing new things that they've never done before than anywhere else in the world. And yet we've got great creativity, great innovation, great market value creation, and enormous, market cap. That old model of talent that we thought that we need to build a company of people with experts in this. Okay, yes, but that also may undermine the reality that people have enormous energy unlocked when they're given something new to do. And that is not something that we build for. We build for keep you in that role that we know you're going to deliver, and we're going to meet our goals, and the board's going to be happy with us, right? And so that's the challenge, that sort of the tension of, if you ask any executive, what's that greatest moment in your career that made the biggest difference? a boss I had put me in a role I didn't think I was ready for, and it was a big stretch assignment, and I did it, and I was like so excited, and that opened so many new doors for me. Okay, so are you designing that to happen in the company that you're leading now? No, you're not. Okay, so why not? Because I need to, know that I can deliver the outcome, and if I put a bunch of people in jobs that they don't know what they're doing, that's going to create chaos. So there's some kind of middle ground there that I'm trying to understand, that I think solves a little bit of that skills crisis that people are facing right now. I can't find people. Yeah, but if someone's close to that, let's say they're 40% away, maybe it's going to cost you less and have a greater outcome for you putting them in there and upskilling them than waiting 6 months to fill the job. You know what I'm saying?
Yep. We need to
Actually,
trust people. To be reductionist about it, we need to trust people to develop themselves, seek out opportunities, grow, experiment, and more open to that process. Danielle, do
actually,
you want to wrap up for us?
yeah, I just want to say a point that I think that's actually the model that DeepSeek has used. So they basically got younger, more junior developer and helped them grow, and then it helped grow the business very quickly. So there's probably like there's a futuristic scenario in which this becomes the norm.
Yeah.
Let's hope everybody embraces change, everybody embraces risk a little bit, and the possibility to lose some of the control, and then everybody benefits. Would you like to close to say just like one last takeaway for our listener?
Yeah, sure. I think, we have, as talent leaders, we have the greatest opportunity of our lifetimes to build a better future work. I think the only barrier we have is our own limited thinking around the way it's been. And I want to challenge talent leaders to see that this is a moment where we should try to understand the skills and learning velocity of our teams. That's probably a superpower, and who can learn new things. And that's a great place to start and try some experiments. We're not going to get it all right the first time, and plant the seeds of experimentation in your organization, similar to the Walmart and the Prudential examples. But we're really facing, I think, a moment where we can make the biggest difference in the world of work than we've ever been given the opportunity to.
Hey.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us for We Are All Agents.